Are you still with me? When you think of an empire, what comes to mind? Probably a single, all-powerful emperor. A vast, centralized kingdom with one capital, one army, one ruler calling all the shots. But what if I told you there was another way? What if an empire wasn't a single entity, but a team? A network of rivals, a league of city-states, each fiercely independent, constantly competing, yet so interconnected that together, they dominated a vast region of West Africa for nearly 800 years. This isn't some historical theory. It was a reality. This is the incredible story of the Hausa Bakwai. Forget the idea of a simple, top-down empire. The Hausa model was something far more complex and, frankly, far more interesting. We're talking about a federation of economic superpowers, a commonwealth built on commerce, culture, and a healthy dose of competition. Their story rewrites what we think we know about power and civilization in Africa. Now, every great civilization has its founding myth, and the Hausa are no exception. The legend is epic. It begins with a hero, a prince from the east, named Bayajidda, fleeing his home. He arrives in the city of Daura, where he finds the people terrorized by a monstrous snake named Sarki, which guards the only well and allows people to draw water just once a week. Bayajidda, being the hero of the story, confronts and slays the beast. In gratitude, the queen of Daura marries him. Their son Bawu and Bawu's 6 sons, along with Bayajidda's own son from a previous marriage, would go on to found the 7 original, legitimate Hausa states. This is the origin of the Hausa Bakwai, 7 true Hausa. It's a fantastic story, but history tells an even cooler one. From roughly the year 1000 to the early 1800s, in what is now northern Nigeria and southern Niger, 7 powerful city-states rose to prominence. These weren't provinces, reporting to a single king. They were Kano, Katsina, Zaria, Rano, Daura, and Biram. Each was a sovereign power with its own ruler, its own army, and its own ambitions. But they were all linked by a common language, a shared culture, and a genius for business. So, what was their secret weapon? How did this collection of rivals become a regional hegemon? The answer is specialization. Think of the Hausa Bakwai like a legendary adventuring party or a modern superhero team. Each member had a unique, indispensable role, a legendary strength that contributed to the whole. Let's start with the undisputed heavyweight champion, Kano. Kano was the industrial and commercial heart of the entire network. Its craftsmen were masters of leatherwork, weaving, and especially dyeing. Kano's cloth, dyed a deep, shimmering indigo in its famous dye pits, was a luxury good sought after across the Sahara. Its central market was colossal, a bustling nexus of international trade where caravans loaded with salt from the north met merchants carrying gold and kola nuts from the southern forests. Kano was the economic engine of the Bakwai. Then you had Katsina. If Kano was the wallet, Katsina was the brain. It was the intellectual and diplomatic center. Its mosques and schools attracted scholars, poets, and jurists from as far away as Timbuktu in North Africa. It was a university town, a center for Islamic learning and a hub for diplomacy between the Hausa states and the wider world. Rulers sent their children to Katsina to be educated, and its influence was felt through knowledge and prestige. On the western frontier stood Gobia. Gobia was the shield and the spear, situated on the edge of Hausaland. It bore the brunt of attacks from neighboring empires like Songhai and Bornu. As a result, it developed into a formidable military state. Its warriors were renowned for their skill and bravery, and Gobir served as the protector of the entire federation, the first line of defense that allowed the other states to focus on their own specialties. And we can't forget Zaria, also known as Zazzau. Zaria was the breadbasket and the forge. Its fertile lands produced the grain that fed the entire region. But Zaria's power went beyond agriculture. It was a major supplier of enslaved people for the trans-Saharan trade routes, capturing them from surrounding non-Hausa communities. And it was a center for metal. Its blacksmiths forged the tools that tilled the fields and the weapons that armed Gobir's armies. Together, this network of specialists was unstoppable. They were trading everything. Salt, a vital preservative, flowed south. Gold, leather goods, textiles, and enslaved people flowed north. Horses and books came in from across the desert, while the famous kola nut, a mild stimulant, was a prized commodity traded throughout the region. This constant flow of goods, people, and ideas made the Hausa city-states incredibly wealthy and powerful. Their cities were a testament to this power. The great walled capitals, called Bani, were marvels of architecture and urban planning, with distinct districts for different crafts, sprawling palaces for the rulers, and towering mosques. Within these walls, a unique culture flourished. The Hausa language became a lingua franca for trade across West Africa, and Islam, brought by North African traders, was gradually adopted by the ruling elites. It provided a framework for law, a boost to literacy through Quranic schools, and a connection to the wider Muslim world, blending seamlessly with pre-existing local traditions and beliefs. This wasn't a centralized empire with a single taxman collecting tribute for a distant emperor. It was a dynamic commonwealth of commerce, where wealth was generated through trade and skill. Their collective economic might, not a single conquering army, was what made them the dominant force in the Central Sudan for centuries. But, as with any group of powerful siblings, rivalry has its costs. The very competition that fueled their economic dynamism was also their greatest weakness. The 7 states were in a near-constant state of low-level conflict, with each other squabbling over control of trade routes, raiding each other for resources, and vying for regional influence. This inability to present a truly united front against an external enemy would ultimately be their undoing. That threat arrived in the early 1800s. A Fulani Islamic scholar and preacher named Usman Den Fodia began to gather a following. He criticized the Hausa rulers, accusing them of being corrupt, oppressive, and, most damningly, impure in their practice of Islam. He argued they blended Islamic law with pagan traditions and engaged in practices forbidden by the Quran. His call for purification and reform resonated deeply with many people, not just his fellow Fulani, but also many Hausa commoners who felt disenfranchised by their own kings. In 1804, Usman Dan Fodio launched a jihad, or holy war. His forces, fueled by religious fervor and popular discontent, were highly effective. They targeted the Hausa Bakwai one by one. The old rivalries prevented the city-states from forming a lasting alliance. Gobir, the traditional military power, was one of the first to fall. One by one, the great cities Kano, Katsina, Zaria were conquered. The 800-year era of the independent Hausa Bakwai was over. But here's the twist. The Hausa didn't disappear. Their legacy was far too strong to be erased. The old city-states were absorbed into a new, vast empire, founded by Usman Den Fodio, the Sokoto Caliphate, which would become one of the largest and most powerful empires in Africa in the 19th century. And what was this new empire built upon? The very foundations laid by the Hausa Bakwai. The Hausa language remained the language of trade and administration. The Hausa commercial networks became the economic backbone of the caliphate. The urban models of the Burni were maintained and even expanded. The great cities of Kano and Katsina, though now under new Fulani rulers, remained the economic and intellectual giants of the region. In a way, the conquerors were absorbed by the culture they had conquered. The Hausa system was just that effective. So, the story of the Hausa Bakwai shows us a completely different model of power. It wasn't a pyramid with a single ruler at the top. It was a network, a web of interconnected nodes, each a master of its own craft. It proves that civilization can thrive on cooperation and competition simultaneously, and that unity doesn't always require uniformity. Their legacy is a powerful reminder of the diverse and sophisticated ways that African societies organize themselves for centuries. What other fascinating examples of city-state federations or trade networks should we explore next? The Swahili coast of East Africa, the ancient Greek Peleus. Let us know your ideas in the comments below. If you enjoyed this look at a different kind of empire, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next journey into history. Thanks for watching. Let's meet in the next segment where we will be looking into the Kingdom of Benin and on